25, 40, run, William, run! He's got blockers in front, 5, touchdown! Joshua Cribbs! Snap back, ball down, kick block! They block the kick!
This is the Oranges, Orange or Browns podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chase Smith, and with me, as always, Browns insider Jeremy Powell. Jeremy, Browns have fired head coach Freddie Kitchens after going 6-10 in his first season. What say you?
Wow, they fired Freddie? Crazy. No, I feel bad for Freddie. I almost think the Browns put him in an impossible position because he really wasn't ready. But then again, I also understand why the Browns did it. Because if you remember at the time, the fans were clamoring for Freddie. Remember? I mean, if you would have done a poll at the time, it was probably 95% 5. And I got to be honest, I think this is worst case scenario for the Browns. I think the last thing they wanted to be doing this offseason is getting another coach. They got the new uniforms coming out. There's probably going to be an announcement about the stadium project that's, a long-term project, but that's probably going to come out. The last thing they wanted to do was to be doing a coaching search. But I'll give them credit for this. At least they, acknowledged their mistake and they moved on from it quick. I don't know if you saw the quote. It's obvious. I joked that it was Todd Monken talking. It probably was Todd Monken because that's how this works. And then later in the article, Mary Kay actually goes on to say, to sing Todd Monken's praises. So it's pretty obvious her source, quote unquote, is Todd Monken. But let me read this. Meanwhile, one league source told Cleveland.com that Kitchens' game week preparation was the worst they had ever seen in a long career in football, and that he never had a handle on the offensive process either during the week or on game day. Okay, that was a quote from Mary Kay's article she wrote tonight. And then she goes on the next paragraph to talk about how Todd Monken wasn't given a fair shake. So this is Todd Monken trying to save himself, okay, leaking this right away. I can pretty much guarantee you that.
Yeah.
But that right there is it. How many times did I tweet that Freddie Kitchens did not have the requisite experience to design an offense? And that's what he had to do. A lot of times when you bring in an offensive coordinator who's been doing it for years, he has a big giant book with his offense, right? Yeah. Freddie never did that. Freddie was hired as what to start last year?
Running
backs coach. He did not have his own offense. He did not have a designed offense. And what did I know you hate Bob Wiley, but what did Bob Wiley say? It was Ken Zampese that was designing the game plans after they fired Haley. And it was Haley's offense they were running. Remember Freddie even talking about extensively how he went to all the players, asked their favorite plays in the playbook, and then he put those into the playbook each week. Remember that whole thing last year?
Yeah.
So Freddie brought in Todd Monken, and remember there was rumors right away that they weren't getting along. Remember that? It wasn't working well. They weren't able to merge their offenses together. And I talked about on here, 4 or 5 times and on Twitter that Todd Monken, it seemed like, was taking little subtle jabs at Freddie and whenever he had press availabilities, right?
Yeah.
And they were never sounded like they were on the same page. You know why? Because they were not on the same page. And I'm sure a big part of this, and I do not blame Freddie for this, because he knew this was the opportunity of a lifetime, and he wanted to go down. If he was going to go down, he's going to go down doing what he wanted to do. So I'm sure, and you remember how truculent and how I don't want to say bullheaded, but how stubborn Freddie was at his press conferences whenever they'd bring up him not calling the plays or not doing maybe take it until the last couple weeks. He had been completely stubborn about everything he wanted to do. So I think it comes back to this, and I haven't really heard anyone else talk about this, the fact that I don't think Freddie was capable or ready to design an offense. And that's what he had to do, and it wasn't all his fault. The talk about the analytics people wanted Stefanski and, Dorsey and them and probably the ownership because I think Jimmy has a tendency to listen to the fans, which is something he's probably going to have to stop doing. Because what do they say? If you listen to the fans, pretty soon you'll be sitting next to him. You got to stop. He's got to stop listening to the fans. But Stefanski has been an offensive coordinator for multiple years. He has his own offense, right? Freddie literally was never an offensive coordinator going into a season before he became an NFL head coach. And that's just obviously a recipe for disaster. And Freddie's a great guy. You know what? I feel bad for Freddie. I think the video that was posted by Channel 3 was wrong to film him leaving the facility like that. Give the man his privacy. This is, and I understand the argument that he's going to get $8 or $9 million for the Browns. Don't weep for him. But still, this is, when you're in this position, you're not thinking about the money. It's about that was your opportunity that you had dreamt of, and it'll never happen again. Freddie Kitchens will never be an NFL head coach again. You can mark that down. He'll get a job as a running back coach because all these guys do, because they all have all these networks across the league. He'll be something in the league again. He probably won't be doing cameo videos with Hugh Jackson next week. I think he'll probably have a job as running backs coach, whatever, eventually again. But it's just he was set up to fail. It's sad. No one wanted this ending to the season. No one wanted this to be this way. The Browns definitely did not want this to be. But I give the Browns credit for realizing the mistake, taking it head on, and getting this nib now, where they still have a window to win for the next few years.
I knew we were in trouble after the bye against New England. Whenever we put up that crap show at Gillette Stadium, every week, Jay, seeing things I've never seen before from an NFL head coach. The Seahawks challenge fiasco at the end of the half. I'm just trying to jot some of the stuff down. Patriots, 4th down penalty just to go for it again. Broncos, 12 men on the field when they're downing it at the half. Bills tricked into calling a timeout at the end of the third quarter. Bengals, 10 men on the field on 3rd and goal. Like, dude, that is why you don't have a job. And it's nothing against Fred. I loved how he accepted responsibility, and time after time this season, I would say, man, Freddie's I like how he protects his players. He doesn't call anyone out, unlike Munkin did a couple times, right? I mean, as a coach, he says things that you want to hear as a player. It just somewhere along the lines, obviously it was behind closed doors in his game prep, just could not execute. Players grew really tired of the same old routine. And I was ready for this to happen about 5 weeks ago, Jeremy. I think you were as well.
But you made it very clear that you wanted Freddie gone for a fair amount of time now.
Yeah, and I mean, I felt like we were one of the first ones to kind of hammer that early. We kind of saw this, dude, this guy can't cut it. I don't blame Baker. I tweeted out today, I want to buy everyone's Baker stock. I'm still 100% on board with Baker. I think the 6-10 season falls solely on Freddie Kitchens and no one else, and his inability to design a weekly game scheme and a game plan for the players to do the best against the opponent's weakness. What did you say? That's not what we do. We just play football, bro. That's professional football, man. That's professional football. Solely rests on his inability to coach, and the fact that we had 2,000-yard receivers and almost the NFL's leading rusher, and we're 6-10. I mean, he'll say that to save his job, but really what he's doing is just damning himself, to be honest. So they have done it. They didn't waste any time. Jeremy, his end of game presser was one of the most depressing things I've ever seen. Not only did it look like it was filmed in an 8th grade English project, just terrible backdrop. I don't know what they're doing in Cincinnati, but it did not look professional. It had a printer paper, matte Scotch.
I've told you many a times that's the cheapest organization in sports.
Bro,
them and the Oakland A's are notoriously cheap. Remember what I said a while ago, that they're literally the only team. It's the only team in the Northern Hemisphere without a indoor practice facility of their own.
It had
shocking
porn star movie lighting. It was terrible. It was awful, and he didn't know what to say. I mean, what's he going to say to those questions?
Dead man walking.
Yeah, it was one of the most.
You know what though? I think he honestly was taken off guard. I don't know if you saw that Ian Rappaport said he talked to him on the phone and he was shocked.
Devastated. Yeah,
emotionally. So I think that he was taken off guard, and that's just, I mean, I do feel for the guy. He's clearly a good guy. He's a family man. He's been through a lot of tough stuff. But this is a big boy business, and this stuff's going to happen. And, Freddie will land on his feet.
So, but I think that points to your problem, man. If you're so aloof to the fact that this should not have caught you off guard. They might not have pulled you aside and said, hey, Freddie, the things that work out, I got to be careful about your job. All he said was, they've told me to do my job. I understood it. They never warned him that this would be the end of his job. They shouldn't have to.
No, he should know. I mean, it's a bit, and he did. And I mean, he might have been blindsided by it, but I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's thinking, look, it looks like we're regressing. The last 3 weeks, 2 of the weeks against not great teams.
Lost 4 of the last 5 of the playoffs.
4 of the last 5.
In our, it was our own, we could have made the playoffs if we went 3 of 5 or 4 of 5.
Yeah.
That's on us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we controlled our own destiny for a little bit there, and he may have been blindsided, but he probably in the back of his mind had to know that look, the NFL stands for what? Not for long, right? So
God,
it's what have you done for me lately?
Jeremy, can
And
you imagine him running an NFL draft?
I
Oh my
mean,
God.
no, I mean, I don't know, man. It's just hey, but now guess what? We're on to the next thing, right? So this is just where if there's one thing that us Browns fans are experts at, it's coaching searches, right? We've been through we've been through more than any organization. This will be Haslam's fifth coach in 8 years as an owner. I
Yeah,
mean,
what was
let's just hope, and I think, what I think, Chase, going forward, they absolutely have to hire somebody who is respected by these players. They cannot bring in a guy to be their friends like they did with Freddie. Freddie was Baker's friend. Freddie wanted to be, but they have to bring in someone that the players respect. You don't always like the people you respect, right? At that kind of friendship type level. So it's got to be. I think it's got to be a guy with head coaching experience, a guy that has respect around the league, a guy that has some gravitas, and who I think that would be is probably different than who you think it would be. But I think Josh McDaniels is that guy, and especially when you look at the way that guys like Odell Beckham Jr. just slobber over Tom Brady, right?
yeah.
And just Tom Brady the goat and all this stuff, and even Baker Mayfield. And look, Josh McDaniels flying down right before the draft and spending a day and a
Yep.
half with Baker Mayfield. There's already I shared a report yesterday out of New England that said there's only two jobs Josh McDaniels would consider, and this was an NBC Boston, and they said it's the Carolina Panthers and the Cleveland Browns are the only two jobs he would consider. Just like last year, he would have considered the Cleveland job. So I think that if that's not already in the works, I'm sure there's already been fillers out to agents, and they're talking about it. But I think it's got to be, if it's not McDaniels, McCarthy, it cannot be coordinator guy. I know that's what's in vogue. Find next level. That's not what the Browns need. The Browns need someone who can manage egos, because there's a lot of egos on this team, and there's a lot of talent. And the Browns need someone who has experience doing that, who's universally respected by players. I mean, Ron Rivera would be a guy that's like in that same mold. Now, I don't know that there's rumors that deal's already done with the Redskins. He's heading there possibly, so we'll find that out tomorrow. But that is the kind of guy the Browns need. You just can't do. This is not a situation where you can bring in unproven coordinator guy. You just can't.
So you bring up a couple of good points. I agree. I think Josh McDaniels, he's my front runner. I think he actually might be a dark horse in this whole thing. I know people are gunning for Mike McCarthy. I think Riverboat Ron, he's going to DC. I think that's pretty
I
much
think
a
so
done
too.
deal. But I agree, man. I think OBJ, I think the way that he loves that. I think McDaniel's love of Baker in the draft. I just think, the past couple of years he's been teasing a lot of teams, kind of left the Colts high and dry a couple of years ago. But I think this is really a job that he's been maybe waiting for the right time. I would be okay with Mike McCarthy. Jay, I want to throw a couple other names out to you. Get
Sure.
your reactions. Bill Cowher, I've heard the name a couple times. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I doubt. I mean, at this point, what he's been out of the league a long time. I mean, maybe it's a Gruden situation where if he gets complete control, but then you'd have to clean house with Dorsey. I just don't see. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it if he wants to, because he knows what it takes to win in the AFC North. He's a physical coach. He's universally respected, so he checks a lot of those boxes. I just don't think that he would want to. But hey, if he does, I think that, like I said, that would require probably a pretty big shakeup though with Dorsey.
Jim Harbaugh.
What's funny is I've heard that mentioned a lot. Um, wouldn't that be something, Jim and John in the same? And then you could maybe start getting them straight, Chase, going forward.
Yeah, right. I just had to Google which Harbaugh it was just a second ago before I said that name. Jim Harbaugh. Jay,
Yeah,
what do you think? You think there's a possibility?
yeah, I do. I mean, he checks all those boxes as well, right? He's a super. He's never won a Super Bowl, but he's been to a Super Bowl as a coach.
Got
He's
robbed.
respected by players. Yeah, exactly. That's true. I think that if he wanted to come back, I think the Browns would consider it.
Urban Meyer.
I I I would be all right with it. I know Urban Meyer, as I found out the other day on Twitter, is a polarizing figure, which I did not realize. You either love Urban Meyer or you hate Urban Meyer. You either would love the idea of Urban Meyer coaching the Browns or you hate the idea of Urban Meyer coaching the Browns. I just can't believe Urban. Also, I love Urban. He's got that swagger. He's got that cocky, subtle cockiness, right? But I just don't think that he would risk his legacy on which with a job that, let's be honest, is a risk, right? And I think Urban cares a lot about the fact that he has won everywhere he has went, right? From Bowling Green to Utah to Florida to Ohio State, he's turned every program he's ever touched into a winner. And I think he'll look at the Browns as just too risky for it.
Kevin Stefanski.
I don't think they'll do it. I know that he's probably got a bunch of fans in that front office, including Paul DePodesta, who probably has a lot to say right now. Um, um, but I just don't think they can do it. I think it's too risky at this time. You can't hire unproven coordinator guy. You just can't do it.
Matt Rule.
No, he's already said he's not. According to our buddy Mike Lombardi, he's already said no.
Mike Lombardi making noise before the game, saying that Dorsey was also on the hot seat. I think he's just a little.
He didn't say that specifically. He said that there could be bigger moves than just the coach, but now that's being reported by a few people that they're going to change the organizational structure and that Paul DePodesta might be the layer just below Haslam, and Dorsey might be reporting to Paul DePodesta.
Jay, why do we do this, man? Why?
I don't know.
Why?
Well, because look, all the reports say, what are the last two big moves that Paul DePodesta wanted? He wanted Sean McDermott over Hugh Jackson. McDermott has been a success in Buffalo, right? Two of the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And he wanted Kevin Stefanski last year, and he did not want Freddie. So, I mean, when you start hitting things right, that's what tends to happen.
All right, Bob Wiley. Why don't we just hire the freaking guy? Why not? Head coach, go for it.
Watch that belly bounce. Let me see that belly bounce. No, Bob, I know. But here's a name that you probably don't have on your list that I would absolutely consider, and I think that he would absolutely command respect, is Jim Caldwell. Jim Caldwell is a guy that I understand why you're saying no thanks. However, he's a guy that the players would respect, and he's got a lot of respect around the league. And I think he's a guy that OBJ and Jarvis would respect. So I think Jim Caldwell, I think you're going to hear his name. I haven't heard anyone else say that yet, but I think you're going to see his name pop up as a potential candidate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just don't think that's a big enough splash. I think they want to not only make the right hire, but make a kind of like make it echo across the league, a la a Bill Cowher or a Mike McCarthy or a Josh McDaniels, those kind of, or a Jim Harbaugh. It kind of has a little bit of fan clout with it. I just think Jim Caldwell, I mean, that's like watching paint dry. I don't know. I just think it's
sure. Yeah, but you know what? A steadying influence might be exactly what they need, right? A steadying influence that's a guy that people respect, a guy that knows how to handle game situations. I'm not advocating for hiring Jim Caldwell. Just don't be surprised if you see that name pop up. Let's just say that.
Well, let's kind of keep this theme going. Been some other reports that some players might be on the out as a member of the Cleveland Browns. Some people believe that Christian Kirksey could be out. Joe Schobert, a person that I've come around to a lot.
You know what? And it's funny. People did like the full 360 on Joe. Now there's an awful lot of talk that, let's go ahead and let him walk.
Yeah.
It was, he stinks, he's good, he stinks again.
And then my boy Njoku, maybe his last ride with the Browns. Jay, what are your thoughts on those three players?
Well, I mean, now we have no idea, right? It's going to be up to whoever we hire and what they think about those players. I think there's a fair chance Njoku will be back because he got 2 more years on his contract, right? This was his third year. Yeah. I'd say there's a pretty fair chance that someone can figure out how to use a big, athletic
body.
Yeah, that can run and they probably think they can get something out of him. Yeah, bad hands, but remember we talked about this a lot. A lot of those big plays that happened last year in the second half of the season, those vertical routes that we saw almost none of this year because that's Todd Haley's offense, the vertical routes, right? Apparently it's not Freddie's. A lot of those routes were set up by using Njoku as a decoy, and he made a fair amount of plays this year. Remember the big 65-yard catch and run in the Cincinnati game that sealed the game at the end? I mean, Njoku had a lot of touchdowns last year. I think we looked at, was it 8 touchdowns last year? I think it was, because he's decent down as a big body down the goal line, and it's something the Browns did not do well this year. So I think that there's a coach could probably see value. I think Schobert's probably done here. We'll see if they hire a defense coach who thinks they can get something out of him. They like his tenacity, and who knows? He hasn't played great, recently. So maybe there won't be that big offer, and maybe he'll come back on a smaller offer. All that remains to be seen.
Njoku can't block, can't catch, but he looks pretty. So good for him. Good for him. I'm really bummed about Kirksey. I love him. I think he's an incredible linebacker. He just can't stay healthy. I think when he's on the field, I think he's a leader. I think he's a great presence. So I'm going to be bummed if what hasn't worked out at all. It just hasn't worked out. Jay, we're going to do a complete season recap here in a little bit. Complete draft. We got the 10th pick, which is hilarious. 6
back in the top 10 where we belong.
6 and 10. The Jets actually pick after us.
What is the Jets? 7 and 9, right?
Yep.
Remember what I told you?
Nope.
I predicted the Jets winning, I think I predicted them to go like 6-1 down the stretch, and I told you they were much better than we thought, and that defense had a ton of talent. They just were so beat up early in the year, and that showed to be true. I mean, that's the Jets. I think going forward are going to be a force to be reckoned with. How about the Dolphins today, winning at
New England? The final moments, Fitzmagic, baby.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yep,
Last question.
And I remember I talked about that too. I said, why would they play early in the year? We said, why would they play Fitzmagic? Because he's just good enough to get too many wins to get a super high draft pick, right?
Yeah.
And that turned out to be true. But I talked about this on Twitter today too, and I think this might have been, I don't want to say it's the last nail in Freddie's coffin, but all the 3 teams. Look at the Broncos, the Cardinals, the Cardinals, and the Dolphins, right? Other teams with first-year head coaches were playing better at the end of the season than they were at the beginning of the season. Look at the Broncos ended up 7 and 9. They had a rookie quarterback go 4-1 down the stretch, Drew Lock, right? I mean, that's how it's supposed to be when you're people understand that a young coach is going to take your lumps, but with a young coach, you have to have it looking better at the end of the season than it did at the beginning of the season. And when it doesn't, what's your hope going forward? Unless you're tanking to get for draft picks. If you're already a team that's already established, like the Browns that have players in key places already, and you look worse at the end of the season than you do at the beginning of the season, there's really no good argument to keep the coach.
Hey, last question, Jay, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
What point of the season were you most disgusted with the Browns? Were you just like, oh my gosh, this is the worst? What was that point in the season for you?
Well, I've talked about this. My turning point in the entire season, and I've talked about this so many times, but I'm going to talk about it again, is the end of the first half against Seattle. That's when I knew that Freddie Kitchens had no idea how to, the situational awareness line that I use that everyone else started using too, right? That he had no situational awareness. That moment right there. And then the fact that he didn't even say he was wrong the next day, that he doubled down on it, right?
Tony.
And that was when I talked about his tone change last week, he actually did. Oh yeah. When they asked him about that, similar situation with the Ravens, why he didn't try to run any time off the clock or any of that. And he said, and he changed, if I had to do over again, I would do it differently. Remember? And that was the moment I was like, this is interesting. Either he knows something or someone has said, look, some things are going to have to change if you're going to be back or whatever. I just thought it was interesting that his tone changed at that point. But that moment to me, that's the moment when I think the season was lost. And Freddie's job was that end of the first half against Seattle.
I lost faith in Freddie the next week after the bye week against New England. But the moment I was most frustrated, bummed, mad, pissed, whatever you wanted to say, is like the end of the third quarter against the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Seeing that Pittsburgh team embarrass us that way, I was just like, with the playoffs on the line, like that was the worst part of the season, in my opinion. I mean, I know that's late. I know it's after all those gaffes that we've talked about Freddie. But still, despite all that, Jay, we had a shot for the playoffs in Pittsburgh against a crappy quarterback, and we got embarrassed against the Steelers of all teams. So thank God the season's over. We're going to do something special here to wrap it up. Season recap. We'll look at the draft. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to compile all of the 5 hot minute segments again, so look forward to that dropping here the next couple of days.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
But I want to give shouts to our presenting sponsors, The Place and Aligned Health Center. Aligned Health Center is Northern Ohio's first chiropractic biobusiness clinic. Their mission is simple: to help people in the West Lake and Beechwood areas achieve the best possible health and overall wellness. Also, shouts to The Place. The Place is a full-service fireplace and spa superstore. The Place has been in business for 52 years, all family-owned and operated, transforming your backyard into the backyard of your dreams. When you think of fireplaces, hot tubs, grills, and patios, think The Place. Also, shouts to Online Motor Credit for sponsoring our 5 Hot Minutes segment all season long. Online Motor Credit, thank you so much. Jeremy, any final thoughts on this Freddie's gotten fired, Freddie got fired podcast?
It's it's almost surreal. I mean, I remember us being so excited for the season,
Yeah.
and who would have ever thought it would end like this, right? I mean, it's just more Brown stuff, but hey, at least they're trying to fix it. Like I said, you got to bring in an experienced coach that can handle these guys. Me, I'll never lose hope. I understand fans that are pissed. I mean, shot a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy in the team, and it's just the same thing over and over and over. Let's just hope they get the right guy in here this time and let him do his thing. And we're not. This isn't a rebuild. This is a jump in the car. This is a new driver, right, for the car. This isn't. We don't got to dump the car and get a new one. We got the pieces in place, so hopefully we can just to get the right driver and be set and ready to roll.
Hey, I want to share one last thing from our friend of the show, Zach Jackson. This will be Baker Mayfield's 4th head coach in 2.5 years.
Yeah, unbelievable.
All right, well, let's go Browns.
Hey, here we go. Whoop, whoop.
It's not an illusion. We're talking about the Super Bowl. Anything less is nothing.